At TI&M, we do a lot of engineering for a multitude of different customers. And the showcase I brought with me today is one of our projects we completed about a month ago. In broader terms, we can speak or see this project we did as an open data project. As probably many of you know, it can be quite difficult to get a hold of trusted and good data, especially on controversial or highly debated topics. However, the Swiss government and most governments, they gather a lot of data and sometimes also actually have quite a high quality of data they gathered. And the project I'm going to present today is a project we had together with the Swiss Federal Office of Energy, and it's a new lifecycle assessment tool. There was previously already a lifecycle assessment tool. It's a tool to analyze the environmental impact of different means of transportation. And we now brought this tool to the future, or to the present, I'd say, more or less. So we started with the use case. The use case basically was fairly simple. It was make the official lifecycle data available. Sounds fairly straightforward. We just upload it and yeah, it's available. However, we then had a bit more in-depth look at whom should we make it available to actually. And there we noticed it's a bit more complex than we thought in the first place, because we want to make this data available to the general public. We want to make it available to the educational sector, so to learn about environmental impact of transportation. We want to present it in an understandable way, for example, for journalists also. But experts should also be able to use the data and empower their own solutions with our data, or with the data of our client. Maybe for a general understanding of such a lifecycle assessment, I'll do a brief introduction. A lifecycle assessment, especially in terms of transportation, is a holistic view of the environmental impact of a mode of transportation. So, for example, I've taken a car here, and we analyze the environmental impacts of all stages this car has. So, we need to source the raw material. It needs to be produced. That's more or less the first impact that car will have. Then we need some infrastructure for the car to drive on. We need roads, we need train tracks. That's the infrastructure part. Then we have an engine. So the car burns fuel or uses electricity. That has some environmental impact. And we need maintenance, obviously, as I assume everyone knows. And at the end of the lifespan, we also have the disposal of the car. And the life cycle assessment includes all these sub-impacts to a total impact of a car. And for comparison reasons, we then broke that down to a distance of 1 kilometer, so we can compare different means of transportation with each other. So now it's your turn. You can scan the QR code, have a try at the application yourself, and play around with it. The application, it makes you available data from over 200 different vehicles, different means of transportation also. We have a lot of normal transport vehicles. We have cargo vehicles, and we even have some special vehicles if you were to be interested, like helicopters or so. Not sure how many of you regularly use a helicopter, but yeah, you can do the analysis. And you always select one or up to let's say, 5 different vehicles, and then see the results of those vehicles. The special or the interesting thing is you can actually customize the vehicles. So if you, for example, were to own a hybrid electric vehicle with a diesel motor, you could actually configure the vehicle to have a hybrid electric motor. You could configure the battery capacity, the fuel usage over 100 kilometers. So you can really fine-tune your vehicle to really model what you actually want to analyze. We got there through, or with quite a journey, I'd say. On the right side of this slide, this was what we started with. It was a huge, huge Excel file. It's called the MobiTool Excel. Maybe some of you know it, but it was public too, but it's very, very hard to understand. It's a huge Excel, and it's very poor maintainable because it has several thousand different formulas in it. It holds the data, the formulas, and the parameters of all 200 or more than 200 vehicles. And yeah, basically, in terms of maintainability, it's a huge mess. So our goal was to improve this situation. And we started by first splitting up this Excel file. We split it into data, pure static data, parameters, and formulas. We then proceeded in analyzing the formulas because, yeah, as probably most of you know, Excel formulas can be fairly complicated, especially if they reference different sheets and lookups. So that took quite some time. And then eventually we came up with a new information architecture we could imply to kind of make the choice of vehicle easier for the users. Our final solution now has quite a split up approach. So we have our data that's stored on our servers. We have our parameters. They're entered by the end user. And we have our formulas also on the server. Everything is sent to the server, and the result is calculated and returned. So basically, yeah, a 3-step approach to a result. The whole thing runs on a serverless stack. Serverless because of several considerations we had. For one, obviously, it's fairly low cost to maintain, and it's fairly low cost to operate, because it's a serverless AWS stack, so we don't really need to care about operating systems and stuff like that. We really need to care about our production code and our business logic we actually have. The second benefit is we have a very low energy consumption, because our serverless routines are only actually used and only actually use compute power when someone actually sends a request. So if we don't have any requests, it's a Swiss tool. Usually we probably won't have that many requests at 2 o'clock in the morning. We won't consume any electricity. And because we rely strongly on static data, we can actually use a content delivery network for caching. So we have good response times, we don't need any provision concurrency, and we can serve most of the requests purely by caching. So our final solution, you already had a brief look at our web application, consists of 4 deliverables in total. We have our web application. The web application is tailored mostly to the general public, educational sector. I think with the high configurability, maybe even some experts will, from time to time, have a look and use it. But we then also have our API. Our API is tailored to, let's say, more professional use. We also have had some interest from SBB to use the API, because the API provides, I'd say it's a kind of sweet spot. It provides the calculations for you. You can use the data in your own tool, with your own UI, do with it what you want, but you don't need to implement all the calculations. However, if you wanted to implement all the calculations yourself, you could, of course, also just use our data set and the source code that will also be available soon, open source. So, all in all, we have an open data project aiming to make the data publicly available, combined with open source code and an open API to provide the maximum benefit to everyone. Now let's have a short look at the lessons learned. One lesson we definitely learned is that these different entry points for different use cases and user sets are, more or less mandatory for such a project, because we cannot, and there's no way we can build an interface that's tailored to the needs of all potential clients. Experts and the education sector will always need a different interface with the application. We learned that Excel is Turing complete without Visual Basic macros. However, we also learned that we should really think about what we actually do in Excel and when to use Excel and when maybe to use some other tool, maybe a database or so, or we use CSV with an application because Excel is very hard to maintain if you want to maintain a big Excel like this over several years. And definitely a takeaway is that static data fits serverless hosting perfectly. So thanks a lot. And
thank you.
Over.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for your interesting presentation.